All right, cool. So it is 5 o'clock here in Australia. So welcome everyone for joining into our workshop around how to be resilient in a pandemic. So essentially, I wanted to start this because, well, we have a bit of a unprecedented situation on our hands with coronavirus and everything that's been happening lately. Driven, of course, is an organization that is really about helping people to manage these kind of challenges in their lives. So we, as an organization, and myself, we wanted to do something a little bit more just to make it more accessible to basically help anyone that's dealing with the stress and all the disruption and all the uncertainty that we're facing now. And that's kind of where the idea came out to, let's just do some free online workshops. There's a lot of people sitting at home now, a lot of people struggling to figure out how to manage this. And sometimes we're doing fine. Sometimes it just all seems a little bit too crazy with all the information out there. So I hope these workshops are useful. And essentially the idea is to talk about resilience, talk about the different concepts around resilience. What are some strategies you can use? And I'll be doing these every Thursday for the next 6-7 weeks, essentially. So this is going to be like an introductory workshop here. After this, we're going to go through each of the domains of resilience every Thursday. So essentially, you can keep coming back every week, and we'll have some new things we'll be talking about. And hopefully, this kind of takes us through the hardest part of then the next couple of months as we figure out, as a civilization, essentially, how do we deal with the situation that we're in. So, with that little bit of background, let's have a quick look on what's up for today, what I'm going to be talking through. So firstly, I'm just going to introduce myself. It's a lot of familiar people that we've got on here, but also quite a few new people that don't really know me. So I'll talk a little bit about me, and then we'll just check in with you guys as well. Who do we have on the line? Where are you from? All that kind of stuff. And just so we get to know each other a little bit, because I want you guys to share a bit with each other as well, and with me. As we go through this workshop. So it's going to be a little bit more interactive. It's not just going to be me talking. We're going to get you guys to talk a little bit about your own experiences as well. And hopefully we can learn from each other too. So then we're going to talk about resilience. What is resilience? How do we define it? A little bit about the neuroscience of resilience. I'm going to keep that very light and straightforward. And then we'll talk about the 6 domains of resilience, which is really where we talk about what are the different strategies and the different categories around resilience that enables us to deal with challenges such as what we're facing now. Then we're going to have a look at an easy way to start building your resilience. So just more things that you can use in your own time, apart from the workshops that I'll be running here every Thursday. So with that, let's talk about me. So this is me over here. I'm Yuri. And a little bit of background, I guess. So I studied quite a few things. So I've studied a bit of neuroscience, a bit of finance, some organizational psychology, and a couple of other things. And really, this is just me being interested in a whole lot of different things. And originally started doing all these studies, really for myself, looking at my own mindset. How do I improve my own mental health, my own physical health? How do I become more of a resilient person? And this led to me eventually publishing some research. So these are peer-reviewed research papers that I published on the neuroscience of resilience. What is it? How do we define resilience? How do we conceptualize it? How do we measure it? How do we build resilience? How do we remeasure it so that we make sure that we're actually making a real impact? And that's kind of what the majority of my research has been about so far. I've written a couple of books as well on resilience and wellness. The latest book is Executive Resilience, which is more about resilience in an organizational context. Here in that book, we really look at how the world is starting to change and how resilience is becoming much more of an important skill as we're going along. And that was even before all of this Corona stuff started. So now, arguably, resilience is one of the most important skills we can have as a society, just because of all of this sudden change and disruption, and how resilience is the capacity to effectively deal with that change and those sudden disruptions in our lives. So these things all kind of came together in me establishing a company called Driven, which is essentially all about helping people to build their own personal resilience. So and the way we do this is through an AI-powered virtual coach that you can chat to it anytime, and it teaches you little resilience techniques and skills every day. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, just as a tool that you could potentially use. So kind of how I'd summarize myself is that, I guess I'm a resilience expert, and that's what's, the last 20 years or so of my life is kind of led up to. And that's what brings me here. For me, it's really about helping as many people as I can to build these resilient skills so that, it's something that we all can really benefit from. And as we look at more of what resilience is, then I think it becomes clearer for why this is something that's so important to do. Right. Now, it'll be useful just to know a little bit about you guys. And here it's really just a quick check-in. So you can just type into the chat over there and just let us all know where are you from and what brings you here. Are you really looking for something for yourself, maybe something for your clients, or something for a business, or even something for your family? So how about quickly type into the chat there, and we'll just use this as an opportunity as well to make sure that everyone can get into the chat function and it all works well. So cool. We've got Leanne over there from Brisbane, looking for herself and for a business. Damien from Los Angeles, thanks for joining from all that far away. Kylie, hey, from Sydney, here, nice. Nadine, New Zealand. Trish in Queensland, great. Con, hey, how you doing? Andy from Sydney, and we've got Ulrika from Finland. Great to see you again. Sandra, good to see you again. Maria, Poland. Man, we got Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Queenstown. I've got a good representation here in Australia, but then also, all over the world. And Warsaw, I love it. I love it. Cool. All right. So as we go through, we can all share a little bit with each other as well. And Texas, we got to have some more from the USA. Great to have you here, Elizabeth. All right. So I did want to mention as well that we are establishing a bit of a community on Reddit at the moment where we can all just talk a little bit more in between. So if you want to have a bit more of a discussion with each other, you can go to reddit.com/r/driven, and in there, so it's really easy to create an account on Reddit, and you can leave it totally anonymous. You don't have to use your real name. Usually on Reddit, it's kind of better that you don't use your real name, just so that you can feel totally free to talk about whatever you like. And on there, we'll be posting as well about what we're doing with around resilience and initiatives that we're running and workshops and stuff like that. And really, it's just an easy way to chat to each other, and I'll be checking in there as well and answering questions and things like that. So feel free to stop by our Reddit account, and we can keep talking about resilience essentially and support each other. So what's happening? I guess there's a little bit of a pandemic going on at the moment, and I think it's kind of resulted in a bit of a phenomenon that I like to call TPBS, which is really toilet paper brain syndrome, where there is really just a whole lot of stress and anxiety and fear that is driving behavior at the moment, and it's causing a lot of a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. And for a good reason, because apart from the health aspect that is already impacting a whole lot of people and causing a lot of anxiety, there is the economic impact, which has just been so sudden and so fast that that has almost resulted in an even bigger impact in people's lives, because there's so many people just having impact to their jobs and things changing very rapidly that we all have a lot of uncertainty. So and to some extent that economic impact is driven by the fear and the anxiety that people are feeling, so that maybe if we had more resilience as a society, we wouldn't have reacted so strongly, and the impact to the stock markets and the job markets and all of that wouldn't have been that big if we were all collectively a bit more resilient. But because there are a lot of people that that succumb to that fear a lot faster, or that initiate things like panic buying, that is where that panic kind of spreads and it becomes a much bigger economic thing. So, and that's almost where, if we can instill more of a community resilience and societal resilience that is spread across all the people in our surroundings, then we can kind of, as a society, stay calmer, and we can handle these kind of situations in a more logical way, in a more constructive way that is not so disruptive in our lives. So that's kind of useful to talk about, but it's also useful to think about, what was our environment even before this whole pandemic thing started. So even before this, already had about 1 in 4 people affected by mental health disorders worldwide, which is already a really high number. About 450 million people struggling with some kind of mental illness, 260 million of those, simply with depression. And now we're heading into a situation where there is going to be so many people stuck in their own homes, being severed from a lot of support networks like support groups, seeing psychologists that they can't really do anymore. So we run a pretty big risk that these numbers are going to be increasing quite a lot just because of the mental impact of the environment that we're heading in now. So, and that's kind of where I think investing in resilience is really important now in particular. So when we're talking about resilience, it's one of those things that, what is resilience really? That's was one of the big questions for me. So that's kind of where I started looking at how do we define resilience, and how do we conceptualize it? How do we think about it? How do we measure it? And that's really what I want to go into next. So quick definition of resilience. So here's a very simple way of thinking about it. A lot of people tend to think of resilience as bouncing back, but it's a little bit more than that. So here I've kind of modernized the definition to be advancing despite adversity. So what do we mean here? So when we talk about advancing, we're really talking about you're moving towards something. You're moving towards something that's important to you, that's meaningful, some kind of goal, something that you value. And despite all of the things that happen in life, you're constantly moving towards that and getting back on track towards that goal. So that's kind of where the word despite comes in, where it doesn't really matter if you're facing adversity, or even if you're not facing adversity, or if you're learning from other people's adversity that they're facing. Regardless of that adversity, you keep advancing towards what's important to you. And adversity here at the same time is not just the really big things in life, like coronavirus, but it's also the small things, like not necessarily being able to get the same coffee that you want because the coffee shop that you usually go to is closed. These are all these kind of little things in life that we need to overcome as well and be able to take in our stride. So this really means resilience is about being able to achieve the things that are meaningful to you despite all the challenges that you might face in life. So that means resilience is not just reactive, but it's also proactive. And that's something we'll talk about a little bit more. Question from Adrian around, will you be getting these slides? So a recording of this will be posted on the YouTube channel afterwards. So you can check these out there. If you want to get the actual slides themselves, so we can chat about that afterwards. So how about the neuroscience of resilience? So what's actually happening in your brain? So this is kind of useful just because it gives you a little bit more of an idea of what's going on in your own head when all of these things are happening. Now, probably many of you will be familiar with these two concepts around the prefrontal cortex and the limbic brain. And I'll just talk a little bit about this because when we look at the neuroscience of resilience, it's useful to understand the relationship between these two. So of course, the prefrontal cortex is more of that smart side of your brain that is really thinking about being able to be creative, to plan ahead. It houses your personality. It's kind of basically the smart side of the brain, and it's the part of the brain you want to have active more often. Because if you have that, then you can think clearly, you know what you need to do, and you can figure things out. So the other side is the limbic brain over here, which is like a very old part of the brain. It's more the survival brain. So here it's really around emotional responses, fear, the fight or flight response. It controls the release of adrenaline and cortisol. So this really, when it activates, it takes blood flow away from the smart brain. So when you're feeling that feelings of panic, that's when the impulsive brain, this limbic brain, activates. It takes blood flow away from the prefrontal cortex, and it just makes it harder to think. It makes you act in a more impulsive way, and that's kind of where people start to panic buy stuff, because they're so afraid. They're not really thinking too clearly about what exactly even should they be buying. You know, should have been buying canned food a long time ago, but instead they're buying toilet paper. So that's kind of where that comes from. And essentially, this is probably something that many of you will recognize. So if you so you can maybe let me know in the chat over here. So how many of you have indulged in emotional eating, or maybe skipped exercise due to low motivation, poor sleep due to stress, using alcohol to relax, spending money on unnecessary things. Yeah, so I see Trisha's like all of the above, and even things like using drugs to cope, which we can, let's just say that's about caffeine that we're talking about there. And as we look at these, so yeah, see quite a few people saying all of the above there, and essentially all of these effects, those are part of the impulsive brain activating. And when it activates, it drives you to do these, much more shorter term things that is not really good for you in the long term. But it just feels like it's the right thing to do because you're going back to that impulsive way of thinking rather than being clear-minded enough to think that, okay, that's what I feel like I should be doing, but actually I should be doing this other thing that is better for me in the long term. Yes, great. Yeah, so very familiar. So what does it mean in terms of the brain? Well, a very simple way to think about this is that resilience is really about the connection between this limbic brain and the frontal cortex. So what does this essentially mean is that if we're building resilience, then we're building connections between these two areas so that the smart brain is better able to downregulate the impulsive brain. So what that means is when the impulsive brain feels like activating, like it wants to start that fear response, it can check with the smart brain to see, should I be activating? And the smart brain can say that, actually, no, we're fine. You don't need to worry. So you don't have to panic. I've got this. I'm in control. And thereby you reduce that fear in yourself, and you reduce that stress that you would feel because you have that confidence, you have that preparation, you have that resilience to not panic about a situation. Maybe it's because you've thought through that situation before, you've done preparations, and therefore I do not need to stress about this particular thing. So this is a very, very simple way to think about the neuroscience of resilience. And in many ways, I'm kind of purposefully trying to oversimplify this concept because it just makes it easier for you to think about it. Because neuroscience is really probably the most complicated topic out there. And there's so many things that we can get lost in just how complicated the brain is. But if we can really simplify it down to this kind of idea of, I can feel that right now my impulsive brain is activating too much. I need to calm that down. I need to activate my frontal cortex more. Then it just kind of helps you get that little bit of mental distance from what's going on in your head in the moment. And you can start to relax and you can focus on what's really important and then think more long-term and take better decisions, more constructive decisions that is more useful for you in the long term, and it helps you to figure out a good way to deal with the situation that you're in right now. So very simple way to think about resilience. So because all you really need to do is just remember those two areas, and remember that when you're working on resilience, you're working on building those connections, which are actual physical neural connections between those two areas. That is then the resilience that you're physically creating in your brain. So how do we actually build resilience in the sense? So this is kind of where the 6 domains of resilience comes in. So this is where I published a whole bunch of research around these 6 domains. How do we measure them? How do we find these areas in the brain itself? And I'll just kind of give you a quick overview of each of these domains. So vision is the one that's at the top there. And vision is really what we see is the most important part of resilience. So if you have that sense of this is what's important to me, this is what I really value in life, then that kind of puts everything else into perspective, because you know that, yeah, this is what I want to keep working on, something that's really motivating. And what's important about that is it also tells you about what's not really important. So you know what to not stress about. Rather than just stressing about everything, you can say, I'm going to focus on this thing, all the other stuff I'm not going to worry about so much. And it gives you that perspective in life. Then we've got composure, which is more about regulating emotions. It's about how do you understand your own emotional life? Because the better you understand that, the better you can recognize that, okay, now I'm feeling this. Is this useful to me right now? Maybe not. Maybe I need to use a technique to get me into a more constructive mindset. So that kind of skill helps you to stay calm and in control, regardless of the situation you're in. Because if you have that calmness and control, then you can respond to situations in a really constructive way that really helps you achieve more in the long term. You can be more strategic in the things that you do. That's kind of where it leads into the reasoning domain, which is more around your critical thinking skills, your resourcefulness, and even your ability to plan and anticipate things that might go wrong. Because if you can plan and anticipate things, then you can do things ahead of time so that you're less affected when something does happen. It's almost like taking out insurance or brushing and flossing your teeth so that you don't have to get a root canal down the track. By doing little things now, it can save you big pain in the future. And this is where resilience is not just something that's reactive, but it's also proactive as well. Because if you do these things ahead of time, then there's less disruption in the future, and you kind of get, as they say, ahead of the curve, so that these type of things don't necessarily affect you in the future. Health is another really important part of resilience, because a lot of people think resilience is purely a mental thing, but it's also about your body. And nutrition, sleep, exercise, those things provide you with a healthy brain that makes your brain more adaptable to things like this. Like, when we have a pandemic, then suddenly we need to respond in all kinds of different ways, and we need to create all new different pathways in the brain. A healthy body enables that process, but also a healthy body means that there is less chance that you have something going wrong with you physically, and especially now it's important as well, where not smoking and those type of things will give you a better chance to against the coronavirus itself. So being able to look after your health right now is really important. And after this, we're going to go through each of the domains in a little bit more detail to talk about what are the impacts that we're seeing of the pandemic in relation to these 6 domains as well. But first, we've got tenacity as well. This is kind of more what people tend to think about resilience usually as that bounce back concept of, something happens and you can get back on track pretty quickly. So here you can kind of see that bouncing back concept is only really one part of the larger concept of resilience. Resilience is so much more than just that, but that is an important part. So persistence is a really important concept here in tenacity, is that willingness to keep going and to have that also that sense of realistic optimism. It's not being overly optimistic, not being about pessimistic, but being realistically optimistic, so that you're hopeful about the future. You know it will be tough, but you still have that sense of hope, so that you expect things might go wrong along the way, but you can work through it anyways. And there's kind of interesting research around this as well, is that being persistent is more important than intelligence in achieving your goals. So that's kind of interesting, because it's, it doesn't really matter how smart you are, if you're not persistent, you're going to be overtaken by someone that has more persistence than you. Interesting research. Then on the other side, we've got collaboration as well. This is about support networks, having people that you can talk to and you can support people that can support you as well, and having meaningful connection with people. So, and this is something that's really important now, and there's some interesting impacts around this with resilience at the moment. So, so now let's start talking about each of the individual domains. So here we'll look at each domain. We'll look a little bit about the impact that COVID is having on these at the moment. We'll talk a little bit about strategies. And then with each of the domains, I'm going to get you guys to share a little bit of your own thoughts and what are the impacts that you've seen and felt yourself. What are some of the strategies that you've shared, that you've experienced, and just share that a little bit with each other so we can kind of talk a little bit about that. So vision up first. Very, very significant impact here from COVID, which is for a lot of people a loss of purpose. And this could be around your job, your workplace. It could be around relationships. It could be hobbies as well that's being impacted because suddenly you can't go outside anymore, or the people that you've been doing something with in the past now can't get together because of social distancing. There's so many different ways in which COVID has impacted just people's sense of meaning and purpose. And a lot of these means that, you know, our goals are getting disrupted, or they're just kind of postponed indefinitely. And what does that mean for us? How long is this going to last? Is this going to be months? Is it going to be years? What does this really mean? So just that loss of purpose is already a really significant impact for a lot of people. So in terms of strategies, so here, something that's going to be really important for us now is to reassess our goals. How can we adapt? So resilience is a lot about adaptation and being able to recognize that, hey, things are a little bit different now. I need to just do something a little bit differently to adapt to this. Because a lot of the time, your goals are not totally invalidated by how the world has changed now, but there might just be some tweaks you need to do to be able to achieve your goal, or your sense of meaning and purpose, just by kind of shifting how you do it or what you aim at or the methodology by which you go around it. So the other part to remember is that these changes in our society is not necessarily permanent. All these things that we're doing now is something that is, you know, all this the shelter in place, you know, social distancing are more temporary means that we're putting in place until we can manage the virus to get to a more manageable level for hospitals to manage, and also get to a vaccine and all those kind of things. So being able to keep that in your to stay cognizant of that, you know, you've got that perspective that, okay, this is hard right now, but we'll get back to normal eventually. So then, of course, there's always, you know, the prospect of finding new meaning in the situation that we're in now. Because quite often for people, you know, when we go through something like this, then we start to reassess that, you know, the things that were important to me in the past, maybe they were not as important as the stuff that is happening now. There are big things, you know, big problems that we need to face and work together now because of just, you know, how incredible the situation is. So, and that's kind of where, you know, we as a society really have a chance now to come together. And I think we're starting to see a lot more of that, of how people are starting to help each other, how people are finding new ways to connect to each other and just try and do whatever we can to solve this problem that we're working through, and help each other through this challenge. So those are a couple of ideas, and I'll just mention now as well. So in the coming weeks, of course, we're going to do deep dives into each of these domains, talk much more deeply about strategies that you can use. So these are just kind of some high-level things that we'll talk through now. And now I'd like to just get all of you to just share a little bit about, you know, whatever you like. You could talk about the impacts that you've personally felt. You could talk a little bit about what has helped you to adapt to the situation. And if you see any of these ideas that you could try yourself. So let's spend just a couple of minutes on that. So feel free to type away and just talk about any of the any three of those points that you like, as you like. So Kylie has mentioned that yeah, doing daily stand-ups with colleagues. So being able to stay in touch, yeah, it's a good way to just find new ways to connect. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the collaboration side as well. So yeah, taking the dog for a walk in the morning, just make sure you're avoiding other people, huh? Elizabeth, taking breaks to walk outside, FaceTime family and friends, yeah. Leanne, lost all my business. Yeah, I was doing okay until it all went. Taking time to focus on new study. Yeah, good work, Leanne. And that's such a big thing for a lot of people. And we've seen that kind of impact as well. There's so many proposals and things that just kind of disappeared because of the uncertainty that businesses are facing at the moment. So absolutely an impact that we're facing all around. Adrian, still coming to grips with the new reality. Are we still in a shock phase? Yeah, Adrian, I think for a lot of people, definitely we are. Sandra, being reminded of the parable about assumptions. Yeah, good one. Goals and exercise have changed. Yes. Speed bump. Yes. So, yeah, this pandemic is a little bit like driving into a speed bump way too fast. So it's a good analogy. Routines, yeah, very important. Lip syncing Broadway hits. That's, I like that. Gratitude about the situation. Yes. Yeah, Tony. Very good point. Yeah, it's a good time to reflect on our purpose, our collective purpose. How do we, what does this all mean for humanity, and our own priorities, and what have we been focusing on so far? So, yeah, cool. So as you can see, a whole lot of stories there already, and of course, all these things. If you want to talk about it more, join us on the Reddit group afterwards, and we can keep chatting. So. Fantastic. So while you guys type a few more things there, let's talk about composure. So what is the COVID influence on composure? Well, there's a whole lot of anger, a whole lot of frustration, stress, anxiety, and fear that people are facing now. And in many ways, it's really fair that that people are feeling that, because there is a lot of things are really uncertain at the moment, and there's a lot of people facing a lot of unexpected impacts that, and you can just see here in Australia the amount of people lining up for income claims and things like that because they've lost their jobs. So I think that's important to know, is that it's not wrong to feel a little bit worried about what's happening. The question is then, how do we manage that? So essentially, as a society, we're really kind of facing very constant activation of the limbic brain at the moment, and like I said, that's fair to feel that way, but we also then need to start thinking about, okay, let's find a way to regulate that in ourselves, so we can start thinking about, how are we going to manage this? What are we going to do? There are all kinds of different ways to be able to work through these challenges, and that's really the challenge that is ahead for us right now. So, strategies around this. There are a lot of things, of course, that you can do in terms of composure, but one of the important things is to simply notice when you're getting really stressed and anxious, and just become a little bit more mindful of that, because that, when you're in that kind of mindset, it's easy to lose a little bit of perspective that this is how you're feeling, and then you start to kind of take that out on other people around you, especially if you're in a relationship, and you're seeing a lot more of each other, and this kind of fear and anxiety that is inside of you because of all the things that are happening affects us how you interact with your significant other, or with your family or children, and it starts to strain the relationship as well. So being able to just kind of catch yourself when you're starting to feel that limbic brain activation, which could be even just noticing things like, oh, I'm starting to sweat a little bit, or my mouth is getting a bit dry, or things like that. There are all these kind of physical symptoms that you might feel that gives you hints that your limbic brain is activating, and you should just kind of take a breath and recognize that, okay, yeah, I just need to, regain my composure a little bit, get some blood flow back to the frontal cortex so you can think a little bit more clearly, and more constructively about the situation. So that's just it seems like something small, but it's a really important skill to be able to catch yourself in those kind of situations, so that you can regain your composure, be calm and in control in the situation. A useful skill here is what we call reappraisal. So this is one of my favorite activities in Driven itself, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But essentially what the concept of reappraisal is here is where when you feel anxious, you have the ability to reappraise that emotion, which basically means you are thinking about the emotion a little bit differently. So one way to do this is to say that, when I'm feeling anxious, actually I'm feeling excited. And that's kind of shifting it from being something that's kind of negative and disruptive to something that's more constructive. And the way you do that is to say that, yeah, I am feeling like I was feeling anxious, but I'm actually feeling excited because this is a big challenge, and I've got a lot of determination to make it through this. And there could be opportunities here that I just haven't noticed yet. And the important thing here is, when you're doing this kind of reappraisal, is that you are bringing the emotion across to another emotion that's of a similar level of intensity. So what does that mean? It means you can't really reappraise anxiety to be contention. So like when you're just content, it's kind of like a more calm thing, but anxiety has got a lot more energy to it, which is the same as feeling excited. You've got a lot of energy there. So that's kind of where you just shift over to a similar level of intensity of emotion. So another example would be, I'm feeling bored. You can reappraise it to say, I'm feeling relaxed. And I'm relaxed because it's nice to just, not really do anything, and just kind of hang out for a bit. And it's just a little bit more of a constructive way to think about it. Because when you do that, when you're shifting over from more negative to more positive emotions, then what it does is it actually makes a physical change in your body. It starts to open up arteries. You start to shift blood flow from the impulsive brain to the smart brain, and you start to be able to think more clearly in that situation. So this is something that I find really fascinating, is that just that little mental switch actually changes how your blood is flowing and where it's going and what it is activating. And just by doing that, you start to become more creative in the situation that you're in. You start to become more able to manage that challenge that you're facing at the moment. So in Driven, we've got a really nice process that people can go through as like if you actually want to put this into practice, like if you're feeling really anxious about something right now, then Driven can take you through that process step by step, just how you reappraise that emotion in the moment. So that's a really useful skill that you could use at any time. It's really it applies to so many different things in life. Just about any time you're feeling a little bit stressed, then you can start to just do that shift and going like, I'm not really stressed. I'm just more feeling, excited or determined. And then that kind of gives you that motivation to say, yeah, this is something cool. I'm gonna do something about this. Even though it's gonna be hard, I can take this on and I can do this. So remember reappraisal. Now, back to you guys. What are some impacts that you felt around composure? Have you felt, that kind of fear and stress and anxiety? Have there been things that you've tried in the past that has helped you to adapt to the situation so far? Any of these things that you can try? So like Isa, like what you were saying before, gratitude, is one of those meditations that is really useful for composure. So so feel free to type a couple of things in the comments there. It'll be interesting to see what you guys have to say. Dilpreet, yoga, great. Yeah, I downloaded Down Dog, actually. Lindsay and one of our team members recommended that, which is a really good yoga app, which is free at the moment during this COVID period. Yeah, give it a try. It was pretty cool. I was doing yoga yesterday. Katrina, you love being at home. Awesome. See, it's always good things that can come out of these things. Kylie, morning meditations, deep breathing. Yeah, and reappraisal as well. Nice. And Joe, I see you on the YouTube channel there, also practicing gratitude. Miracle mornings, great. Sandra, blessing, gratitude for the blessings I do have. Yes, and that's true, Sandra. So we still have so much actually that it's not like we've suddenly lost everything. We still have so much. It's just that we've got to think a little bit differently and act a little bit differently for a while. Gretchen, scuba breathing. Interesting. 5 in and out and visualizing being in equilibrium in the water. That sounds really nice, actually. Katrina, yeah, being creative with your own routine. Yeah, all kind of new challenges that we get to face. Yoga, more yoga, yes, love it. Yeah, Isa, yeah, Isa, that's really important actually, is that we all have survived 100% of our worst days so far. And that's something that that is useful to remind ourselves of, is that we have been through so much together, and we'll get through this as well. And this will just be another one of our stories that we'll go, man, do you remember that time when there was a worldwide pandemic and we were all locked in our houses for weeks and weeks? And yeah, and it just becomes another one of those stories of our lives. Cool. Sandra, you're working a lot on disabilities, social justice. Yeah, a lot of things that we take for granted. Cool. All right. Yeah, see some awesome stories there and ideas from people. Fantastic. So let's talk about reasoning. So how does this kind of fit in? So what's the influence that we see from COVID so far? One of the big things here is information overload. So this is kind of interesting when we think back to SARS and MERS, some of the previous pandemics that we've had that weren't really as big as COVID and the coronavirus, is that when those happened over a decade ago, there was not a lot of information about them. There were a couple of news stories and things, and we'd hear a little bit about it, but there wasn't really that much going around, just around what was actually happening in the world and how bad it was. Now things have shifted quite a lot because we've got so much more access to information, and information's coming so much faster. So with coronavirus, it's like everything is suddenly coronavirus and COVID and the impacts. And there's been another death here and another infection here and a cruise ship here and something there. And it's just this constant flow of information, which I think is part of what is causing such a big that it's kind of got like a bit of a feedback loop that's causing a lot of the fear and then the impact to the economy. Is that we think this is something really big, so we're talking about it all the time, and then that creates more panic, and then that creates more stories that we need to talk about and read about, and it just kind of keeps going and keeps growing and growing. So just that by itself is something really big that we need to manage. And because it takes a bit of a toll on our own ability to think clearly, because it's just suddenly this huge thing that's just constantly bombarding us with more information. So another part of that, of course, is just constantly having to do contingency planning, like, oh, no, I can't do this anymore. Now what am I going to do about this? And how am I going to do this now? And just figuring out all this, what if this happens? And what if that happens? What am I going to do here and there? And that way it just starts to take up this really big chunk of our brains that we're just constantly thinking about COVID stuff and Corona stuff. So what are some strategies that we can implement here from a reasoning perspective, which is really about our ability to think creatively and be resourceful and all that kind of stuff. So one thing you can do is to take precautions and then relax. So this is where you say, okay, cool, all this stuff is happening. I'm going to shelter at home, shelter in place, stay at home for a while. I'm going to buy food in advance for the next 2 weeks at least. No need to buy for months in advance because the supermarkets will be open, but at least have enough so that if I do need to suddenly quarantine myself because of exposure or something like that, then I'm okay and I don't need to worry. And that way you basically are doing the things that you need to do. You know, you're washing your hands if you're going out and all that kind of stuff, but you don't need to constantly think about, oh, what else do I need to do? It's just saying, yeah, I'm doing the stuff that I need to do, and now I can relax about it. Most important part is just that you're going to keep doing that stuff, but you don't need to constantly worry about it. So that is, you know, one very simple thing you could do for yourself, just to kind of give you a little bit more mental space. The other part also is to limit the number of coronavirus updates that you take. If you're one of those people that just are constantly checking the news and going like, oh, what's happening now? Has something happened in the last 10 minutes? Oh, and checking a whole bunch of different news sources as well. And it's just kind of taking up like hours out of your day because you're constantly trying to keep up to date with, you know, what's going on with the corona world. Try to limit that to maybe like once a day, maybe not right before bedtime or something, so you're worried about that while you're sleeping, maybe in the middle of the day, something like that. And that way you're just kind of developing a bit of a discipline around just how much of an impact corona has on your life. So then, of course, you might have quite a bit more free time because you're not going out as much anymore or something like that. And here it's a useful time to do some upskilling and do some training, you know, learn new skills, especially if your business or your work is potentially really impacted by corona. You can start to learn new skills that might be useful in a different way, that could lead to maybe new forms of employment or new hobbies or something like that, that gives you a sense of purpose and, you know, also a bit of resiliency in terms of how can you adapt to potentially a changing world because of how, you know, social interaction is changing because of this. So it's useful to, you know, take this as an opportunity, essentially, to say that, yeah, cool, I've got to do something different now. And I do have time now because I'm at home a lot more. So I'm going to do some online courses. I'm going to learn some new things. And then as you come out of this, then you've basically grown as a person. So again, back to you guys. What are some ways that you've seen yourself being impacted? Have you felt that kind of effect of just being overloaded by information? How do you adapt to that? Any of these things that you feel like you can try? Let's see what you guys have to say. Yeah, Adrian, yep, information overload leads to a lot of uncertainty. Kylie, also information overload. Yeah, Sandra, being able to realign the business with emerging opportunities. Yes, important. Yeah, especially on the coaching side, because there's so many coaches that's really being impacted by, you know, can't really do workshops anymore. So let's shift to like more online type of workshops, and find different ways to be able to engage with people and help people through this period. Yes. Dilpreet, the funding startup scene. Yeah, I had a big call with a bunch of venture capital people this morning, and yeah, they weren't really, they weren't too positive. Let's say it makes you laugh and cry. Yes, that sounds about right. Gretchen, yeah, choosing information sources wisely. It's a good idea. Shifting from being a consumer to being a producer of ideas and action. I like it. Ulrika, sounds like you're already doing what I've listed. Fantastic. Trish, sit on a glass of red wine and watch news at 7 p.m. only. Sounds like a good one. I like it. Nicole, yeah, dealing with panicked clients as a psychologist with EAP program. Yeah, Nicole, and if you're in Australia as well, just the Medicare codes and all that around not being able to support telehealth, those kind of things is just it's a really difficult environment at the moment. Cameron, trying to inspire people with quotes, might have made them stop even for just a few seconds. Hey, people love quotes. Brandon, eat, watch TV, sleep, repeat. Con, yeah, forcing yourself to do what you love. Yes, yeah, that's good. And there are opportunities in these to yeah, just kind of focus on, yeah, this is what I really want to do. Crystal on YouTube, staying away from social media and disengaging from there instead of sharing information about how to cope with schooling at home with affected friends. Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of information on social media as well, so it's kind of useful to just to take a step back from that. And Leanne, play with the new puppy. Nice. Very reliable. All right, cool. Let's look at tenacity. So what's COVID really doing with us here? And with tenacity being all about persistence, so it's quite fair to expect that that COVID is really affecting our ability to stay motivated. Sure, tenacity is about persistence, but what are we persisting towards now? Because if our sense of meaning and purpose have been impacted and our goals are kind of not really available at the moment, what are we working towards? And of course, tenacity also involves a lot of routines, and there's a lot of disrupted routines right now. So what are some of the strategies that we can try here? Well, this is something that a lot of us are doing at the moment, is we're establishing new routines. Because just when you're losing your routines, it can make it really hard to just figure out, like, what should I be doing? And then you don't really know what you should be doing next. And it just kind of makes things even more complicated to think about. So this is kind of where it takes that little bit of mental discipline to establish a new routine that, okay, I'm still going to get up at this time. I'm going to do a quick workout, and then I'm going to eat breakfast at this time, and then I'm going to have a shower and all that kind of stuff. And even that alone is really important, to still make sure that you shower every day, that you're brushing your teeth every day and shave, whatever. And you still maintain that kind of personal hygiene factors, which is in itself a little bit of an indication of your own mental health. Because if you're starting to feel like you don't want to do those things anymore, that's kind of a signal to really start to pay attention to yourself. So establishing those new routines are really important, and then to stick to them, even when there's nothing else that's really forcing you to do it. Make yourself stick to it, because then, like, if you keep going to bed at the similar time, get up at the same time, that just kind of helps to still maintain and condition your body so that you've got a good routine, and that gives you energy during the day, and you know what you're going to do, and it kind of takes a little bit of that uncertainty away. Yeah, and it's really that Bear Grylls quote: "Improvise, adapt, overcome." That's really kind of what it comes down to, is that, yeah, our sense of purpose and our goals and things might have changed. So we're going to think about it differently. We're going to adapt to that, and then that's going to be the new thing that we're going to be persisting towards. And here, a lot of it is really about discipline. So discipline is where you are doing something even when you don't feel like doing it. A lot of the times you're not going to feel that motivation. You're not, like, motivation is something that is a bit fleeting. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. So don't rely on motivation. Rely on discipline instead. So that, yeah, even if I don't feel like doing a workout, I'm going to do it anyway, because this is important. This is part of my routine. This is just what I do. So being able to kind of almost force yourself into those type of things, so that eventually you it becomes more natural to you over time, that this is just how you are and what you do, and thereby you naturally become almost kind of more motivated because of that, because you're motivated by your discipline. It's kind of interesting how they relate. So back to you guys again. Have you? I'm sure I know we've already kind of seen this already, where many of you have experienced disruptions in your routines. What's kind of helped you maintain your motivation through this period? And have you also been trying to establish your own discipline, and how have you gone about that? Curious what you guys think. Kelly, trying to stay away from the fridge and pantry takes enormous tenacity. Yeah, especially when you're all stocked up, from lots of buying at the supermarkets, and there's so much to eat in the pantries. Ulrika, for me, working from home is normal life. Yeah, and now it's being impacted by other people not having their normal routines. people more available on social media, and it's kind of distracting more. Yeah, so actually even being able to establish those kind of boundaries for just how much interaction and when do you have that interaction is important. Exercise usually helps with the motivation. Had a routine of swimming. Now you can't. Yeah, swimming is a little bit hard to do at home. Like I've got a pool down in my building, but they've shut that down as well, so I can't even go there. Sad. Got knocked your Zen practices 3 weeks ago, slowly getting back into it. Yeah. Staying more connected at home for Katrina. Yeah. It's good and bad. Distracting, but also great to connect with people you wouldn't ordinarily. Yeah, and that's actually kind of an interesting one. So a lot of people are kind of getting in touch now that haven't heard from in a while, and same for me, just kind of reaching out to people like that. So yeah, interesting. So let's talk a little bit about collaboration quickly, and then we'll talk a little bit about health, and then go into just a quick chat about Driven itself. So we're almost towards the end. But yeah, so what's the impact on the collaboration side? So interestingly, loneliness was already a bit of an epidemic before all of this stuff began. So now when we're seeing, we've been trying to do so much to get people to, get in touch, more face-to-face contact, talk to more people, and now we're going, social distancing, stay away from other people. So now, highly likely that loneliness is going to become an even bigger issue, and we're going to see a lot in terms of impacts on this down the track. So if you're in the psychology world or coaching world, I think, there's now like a little bit of a this kind of weird period, but then after that, I think the impact from this is going to be huge in that field. So what does this mean in terms of our strategies? Is that we need to take even more time to connect. And here there's the concept of physical distancing, but social closeness. Is that we're physically not that close together anymore, but we've got to make even more effort to connect with people. And not just connect, but make it meaningful connection, so that we're actually talking about real things. And we're not just talking about the weather and what's the latest update on COVID or something like that, but just really talk about how are people really doing, what's going on, what's important to them at the moment, how what are they thinking about in terms of where are they going to go in life after this, what are just the other things that are unrelated to COVID, and just really have that meaningful connection with each other. And another important part is to also just have a little bit more patience with people in this period. I think we're all a little bit on edge. And if we kind of keep in mind that, you might be able to see that in your friends and family as well, is that impulsive brain activation that leads people to be a little bit more emotional in their communication, might have a little bit more fear, and just might make it a little bit harder for people to just have that patience with each other. So for yourself at least, recognize that other people are also facing difficult situations. So just kind of catch yourself to be able to have that patience with people. So Elizabeth, thanks for sticking around. So we'll be posting a recording of this afterwards. So if you do need to drop off, all good, and you can watch the rest of it afterwards. But yeah, so that's kind of some ideas around collaboration. So back to you guys again. So what kind of stuff have you seen? I think we've kind of covered this quite a bit already, around how many of you are saying that you're making more time and effort now to talk to people and reach out to people. And then also being able to manage how often do you talk to people as well. Sandra saying there that she's checking in with her close family and friends every day. That's awesome. And Cameron, checking in with people that live alone. That's a really good point, because there's a lot of people that don't really have anyone else, and they're kind of just by themselves every day and can't even go out anymore. Dilpreet checking in with multiple friends. Kylie, help you connect more with your kids. Yeah, that's really useful. Because it's kind of like you teaching them as well. How do you manage this kind of thing? Like, how often does something like this even happen? So being able to teach people that, yeah, don't take these things for granted, and being able to come together as a family unit is really important. Gretchen, Triathlon Club is now a virtual exercise group, which is awesome. I like that. Cool. Leanne, virtual afternoon coffee catch up with friends. Yeah. So even driven as well. So we do like a daily lunch group as well, where we all just get on video calls and we're just chatting with each other, and just at least we can see each other and keep talking and keep connecting, even if we can't see each other in person. So a lot of these kind of video call software being very active lately. And Ulrika, yeah, friends and chat on Facebook, creating groups there. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so a lot of people just contacting people more. So, and that's awesome to see. And that's really what we need to do in this time, is just how do we stay in touch with each other and make it meaningful. Cool. So let's talk a little quickly about health as our last domain here. So of course, one of the big impacts from COVID here is that stress leads to a lot more snacking. So that's one of the effects of the impulsive brain activates when it makes you more impulsive. So it makes it more likely that you'll just reach for a snack and you'll eat it, and you don't really think about it, because the brain doesn't want you to think about it. The brain just wants you to do it. So that's important. It can be hard to stay motivated to exercise at home, like especially if you're used to working out with other people. And suddenly you have to do it by yourself, and there's no one else to really motivate you, or classes or things like that. That can make it a little bit tricky. And yeah, and just having access to the foods you would usually eat. With the supermarkets, at least here in Australia, it's getting a little bit better now to be able to find the food that you need. But all those things are kind of a little bit kind of disruptions you might face. So what are some strategies here? Well, of course, there's lots of ways to work out at home. There are a lot of body weight exercises that you can do that I've been doing. I've also just recently got and ordered a bunch of resistance bands. So because I'm used to doing weight training in the gym. So now I'm kind of learning how to do all those same exercises with exercise bands. And I was just talking to one of my staff this morning about this, and it's really resistance band training. It's really like an exercise in creativity as well, because you can really do anything that you would do in a gym normally with resistance bands. It's just about figuring out how to do it and being resourceful and kind of finding online, how you can do those kind of things. There are other things that you can do as well. Like let's say you're starting to watch a whole lot more Netflix than what you normally do. Then kind of multitask with that. So you can do some yoga or stretching or something like that, and kind of make that rule that whenever you're watching Netflix, you're also going to be doing some yoga stretches and things like that while you're watching it at the same time. So you don't just become couch potato and just become really inactive during this period. Then another very simple approach to reducing snacking is to remove the temptation itself. So don't buy snack food in the first place. And if you have them in your house and they're a big worry or trouble, then maybe even just throw them out. I know it's a really crazy idea, but just being able to remove those temptations in the first place is a very reliable way to make sure that you don't succumb to them, because then you don't actually have them to eat in the first place. So, so those are just some kind of practical ways that you can achieve some kind of level of discipline in terms of being at home so much and still looking after your health. So curious on your thoughts here. What have you guys noticed? Cameron, yeah, all good. See you later. Have you guys experienced similar kind of impacts in your sleep, nutrition, exercise? What have you been doing to make sure that you kind of manage this and find some new ways to exercise and do things that you can't do anymore? So Paul there, joining the kids in their homeschool HB yoga time. Nice. How you doing, Paul? Good to see you. Sandra still going outside. Yeah, going for walks. Yeah, Kylie going to bed early. Sandra still working exercise. Yeah, not really motivated. Yeah, and it can be a tough one just to kind of motivate yourself. So one of the important things about exercise is that it's much more important to do something rather than nothing. So even if you just do like a 5-minute short session of something, even if it's just, high knees jogging or something like that, it doesn't need to be half an hour or an hour session. Just doing something is much better than nothing. So that can be like just kind of a starting point to kind of get back into that motivation and discipline to keep doing something. Leanne, getting better at nutrition, more time to make good food. Yeah, well, if you've got more time at home, then yeah, it kind of removes some of the excuses. It's true. And yeah, big impacts on sleep for Andrew. Sleep, yeah, a lot of what ifs. And that's kind of where the reasoning side comes in, to think about, yeah, okay, I've taken the precautions that I need to. I've got plans in place. Now I can stop worrying for that for now, and I can reevaluate as the situation changes. So it's kind of, yeah, being able to tell your brain that, yeah, cool, we've done enough about this. We don't need to worry about this right now anymore. Yes. Sandra, getting the garden ready for winter. Yeah, that's a nice thing to do. Cool. Yeah, being indoors, a lot of motivation to exercise. Yeah. Increased motivation to exercise. Hey, nice. Maria, exercise with friends online. Yeah, so I see a lot of those kind of groups starting up now where we're just joining people to do stuff online, and especially when things are live, and I think it's a little bit more fun as well. There's just a kind of switch between watching a recorded video versus watching something that's live, even though in many ways it's very similar. Just kind of knowing that this is something that's happening, and potentially other people can see me as well, then yeah, it kind of increases motivation. Awesome. So that's kind of the 6 domains. So we'll dive into those more in the coming weeks. So you all, of course, are welcome to keep coming back for those, and we can keep talking about that and learn from each other. So I think this is really useful, just everyone talking here about their own experiences. So I'll just talk really quickly about basically the program that we've put together. That's really an easy way for people to build resilience, and that's essentially Driven, which is a resilience coach in your pocket. Essentially, it is an AI-powered virtual coach that's got a whole bunch of useful activities that it teaches you, through 5 minutes each day. Here's something you can do today that'll help you to start building your own resilience and to increase your capacity to deal with these challenges that we're facing. So one of the things that's really useful about this is that you can chat to it at any time. So you can check in through the emojis, and you can say like, if I'm not doing so well, then you can chat to Driven about what's going on. This is one of the functions that I use in Driven quite a lot. So this is basically you talking to the bot. So it's an automated system which uses a bit of natural language processing to figure out what you're talking about. And it's not going to solve your problems for you, but it does help you to get your thoughts out there and to structure your own thinking and work towards a solution through your own mind. And that way it quite often just kind of get you out of those thought loops that you might be going through, like all those what ifs and things like that Andrew, like what you might be experiencing, and just kind of get you towards a more constructive mindset, so that you can basically go, okay, cool, I can relax now about this and kind of get back to other things. So that's a really useful function in there. You can also track your improvement over time, track how's your mood going through the ups and downs of the days. And we use the PR6, which is our scientifically validated resilience test that gives you that knowledge about what are your strengths, where can you potentially improve, and then based on your scores there, then Driven gives you content that'll be really useful to you right then. And this is out of a big library of around 200 plus techniques. So this includes like the reappraisal technique that we talked about, which you can access at any time. And a whole bunch of other skills and techniques that can help you to figure out, how do I manage the situation that I'm in now? How do I maintain that sense of motivation and purpose and work towards the things that's really important to me? So a lot of quick techniques as well that like if you just need to, if you're really worried about something or something just happened, then you can quickly go into Driven. You can access those quick techniques, and it just kind of helps you get back on track really quickly. So the important thing about this is that it's a scientifically proven system. So we've published whole bunch of research papers on this, and these research papers are available for free on our website, hellodriven.com. And what we see is, when people use this regularly, if they work through those daily activities, then we get around a 25% improvement in resilience. And what that 25% improvement means is that you become much more able to deal with these kind of situations with confidence, and you can work through and maintain that sense of meaning and purpose and motivation over time. So anyone can download this. This is available online on the app stores. You can just look for the Driven Resilience app. So quick reminder, feel free to join us on the Reddit group on r/driven, and feel free to come and chat more around this. Be great to hear your thoughts around there, and to keep talking about this, and to see you guys back here every Thursday as we work through the different areas of resilience. And yeah, it's fantastic to have you all here. And now I'll stick around for some Q&A, so you guys are welcome to just keep asking questions. People on Zoom, you can use the question and answer function. I'll try and have a look on YouTube as well, so for anyone on there. And yeah, and anyone else, if you are happy, if you've gotten everything that you need to, feel free to drop off here, and man, I'll stick around and answer some questions. Cool. Great. So I do have a question from anonymous attendee. In regard to the overloaded information, from your point of view, should the government and media be transparent to their citizens? Yeah, it's a tough question, because it's, what are they being transparent about? Because there's so much information being reported, and I think there's a lot of confusion with the government itself. So even if they were being transparent, are they just going to be confusing us even more because they're confused? So it's it's a tricky one. Cool. And all right, Paul, recommend it, love it. Thanks, Con, Sandra, Ulrika, Bill, Kelly, Sandra, Kelly, Leanne, awesome. Thanks very much. Any other questions? Feel free to type them in. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. I'll stop sharing over here. Hey, there you go. Cool. All right, Isa, I'll be back next week. Awesome. John Armitage, recording will be made available after this, so absolutely. You can check back on our YouTube channel, so you can also just subscribe to our YouTube channel, then you'll be notified next week when we go live. Ulrika, what will the topic be next week? Good question. So I was thinking probably a good place to start might be talking a little bit more about composure and how do we manage the stress that we're all feeling around this period. Because then, when with all of our collective impulsive brains downregulated, then I think it's a good point to start going into the other domains, like collaboration is probably a good one for the week after that. Just as connection is going to be a really interesting one to think about and focus on a lot more now. Cool. Unstable connection. Well, Dot, hopefully the recording will be a little bit more useful for you there. And Ulrika, great. Brandon, would the presentation be available to all of us? So the recording would be, if you want to access the presentation itself, same as Adrian, just get in touch, send me an email. You can have a chat. And cool. And Andrew, how do you see the impact on society once we get through this health crisis? Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like, what's this going to mean for us in the long term? Because I think there's going to be, especially if this lasts a couple of months in terms of the isolation, shelter in place, all this type of things, that might result in quite a bit more of a reluctance for people to get in touch with each other. It might be a lot more of people not really wanting to interact face-to-face anymore. Like if we're thinking about a vaccine for this, is most likely 12 months away at least. is kind of what we're looking at so far. So even if we don't get it straight away, most experts still feel like it's just a matter of time before a large percentage of the population do get it. So we might go into this whole big phase of people not really wanting to have a whole lot of physical contact. And that could be quite a significant change for how society impacts and how we connect with each other. And unless we can really find these new ways to connect with each other, it could have quite detrimental impacts in terms of our mental health. And my thoughts on this as well is really around how effective is virtual interaction versus physical interaction. Because and like in the brain, for example, you've got the fusiform gyrus, which is really focused on recognizing emotions and expressions in other people, and activating those mirror neurons so that you can really be compassionate with someone else. And just kind of through my own readings and research, my take on that is that virtual interaction is not as effective in terms of triggering those mirror neurons and that kind of compassion when it's through a screen. And that means we are not getting that same kind of meaningful interaction or that same feeling of connection with each other. So one of the things that I'm worried about a little bit is that this period of less physical interaction is going to result in us kind of slowly feeling that like we're losing meaningful connection with each other. So I'm really interested in more research around that in the next while, so that we can kind of understand, is that really something that's going to be a problem? Can we get that same kind of meaningful connection with each other through a screen, or are we kind of missing something and we need different technologies to really be able to have that same kind of activation in the brain itself when we are communicating with each other? So yeah, so Andrew, those are kind of the things that I'm really interested in seeing. Just what does this mean for us as a human race, and people being able to really connect with each other and understand each other and have compassion for each other when we're really mostly talking to each other through screens. So yeah, good question. Yeah, Tony. So maybe that's right. Maybe we are becoming more connected, and I'm hoping that that's the case, and that we are using this as an opportunity to really understand each other more and connect with each other more. So that's definitely in the better outcome scenarios of this, is that if we can establish that really deep connection with each other, and we use this as an opportunity for the world to come together, and that's where this type of thing can be an opportunity, is that here's a big external threat that is not one society clashing with another society, and we just become more connected all around the world because we recognize that we're all just people in the same planet, and we need to look after each other and support each other. So hopefully that's the case. Yes. Okay, cool. Any other questions? For now, I'll give you a couple more seconds if you'd like to cover anything else. Otherwise, I think we're all good. Dilpreet, got anything else to add? John? Yeah. Can wearables be used with the Drivens app? Not just yet, but yeah, it's something we're working towards. Cool. John, see you around. And yeah, I think that's it. I think we can end that over here. So if you've got any more questions, stop by the Reddit account, so reddit.r/driven, and check it out. Otherwise, yeah, get the app, use it, to be it's useful as just something to keep working on resilience in the meantime. And otherwise, yeah, feel free to stop by next Thursday. So I'm going to send out emails again around the next session. I'll post it on our website as well, so you can register there, or always join on YouTube as well. And I hope you have a fantastic week and you stay resilient, and see you all next time. Have a good one.